All right, good afternoon. Get the screen loaded up here. Does everybody have sound? We're all good? Appreciate it. We're actually getting started on time today. Look at that. It's great. We'll get you on with your busy days. Just wait for she's on. All right, today you're going to hear from Chief Joseph, so it should be short. He'll go over the officer-involved shooting that occurred yesterday. Again, as always, let him finish what he needs to say. We'll have questions at the end. You'll see one image up. We'll end up emailing to you. There will be an accompanying press release that'll go out as soon as everybody's out of the building. If everybody's good, we'll get started. All right, Chief.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, our officers were on routine patrol in a quiet neighborhood in northeast San Jose when they were suddenly dispatched to a report of a stabbing at Cataldi Park. The 911 caller claimed his 9-year-old son was being stabbed by an unknown assailant. Officers rushed to the scene to help. These officers had no idea that the frantic person on the line was in fact the suspect himself, a deranged man who had murdered his own son, and whose call for help was actually a twisted plan to force officers to shoot him. A final desperate and selfish act. Suicide by cop. Officers would later discover that the 9-year-old child they were rushing to save was already deceased, gruesomely stabbed to death by the suspect. The child suffered from injuries so severe that it's unimaginable they could have been inflicted by his own father. We're still early in this investigation, and what we know now may change as the investigation progresses. There are some questions we may never know the answers to. What we do know now and can share is the following. Yesterday at approximately 3:23 p.m., a father called 911 to report that someone had stabbed his son at Cataldi Park. The caller was hysterical, stating the assailant was still on scene, and gave a description of the suspect that officers later discovered exactly described the caller himself. When officers arrived on scene, they located the agitated suspect hunched over a bloody child on the ground in a raised grass area of the park. The suspect, who was covered in blood, was clearly armed with a large, bloody knife. Officers pleaded with the suspect to drop the knife so they could render aid to the child. Repeated de-escalation attempts were made, but the suspect refused to cooperate and instead made several statements indicating he intended to be shot by the police. Officers realized they could not continue pleading for cooperation with the suspect any longer, as they needed to reach the child victim to provide medical aid. Before a less lethal option could be deployed, the suspect unexpectedly stood up with the knife raised and charged at the officers. The officers discharged their firearms, striking the suspect. As the suspect fell to the ground, officers rushed to aid the 9-year-old boy, who they then learned was tragically already deceased. A bandana covered the child's face, and when officers removed it to assess his condition, they discovered horrific injuries that I will not describe. The child was clearly deceased, killed in the park by his father, who then lured the officers into a shooting. Details of the involved officers are as follows. 1 officer and 1 sergeant discharged their firearms during the incident. The officer had approximately 4.5 years of experience as a police officer. The officer was CIT trained and had their body-worn camera activated at the time of the shooting. The sergeant had approximately 19 years of experience as a police officer. The sergeant was also CIT trained and had their body-worn camera activated at the time of the shooting. The suspect was identified as 48-year-old Matus Gerban of Fremont. He had no local criminal or documented mental health history. This tragedy is an example of the type of gruesome and horrific situations officers can sometimes be called to. There is no known or understandable explanation for what could possess a father to take the life of his own son, especially in such a violent manner. What we do know is that the conclusion to this tragedy was both deliberate and calculated. The suspect chose the location and pre-planned a confrontation with officers in order to force them to take his life. Suicide by cop is a cowardly act, one that draws officers into the suspect's disturbed nightmare, leaving them to carry the burden of that moment for the rest of their lives. The officers who responded that afternoon were running toward what they believed was a child desperately in need of help. They came intending to save a life, not to take one. They had no way of knowing that this horrific and unfathomable act of violence had already led to the loss of an innocent child's life before they even arrived. Now these officers have to carry a weight that was never theirs to bear, but one that was placed squarely on their shoulders by a man whose final act was as selfish as it was senseless. What they saw yesterday, they will never unsee. Our hearts are all crushed to see an innocent child robbed of his future, and our condolences go out to his family and everyone that will be forever affected by this incident. Yesterday will leave scars on every person who responded, investigated, or witnessed this tragedy. It's clear that our officers acted with courage under unimaginable pressure. I'm never surprised when I see the bravery and professionalism our officers display when responding to the most intense situations. But I am proud and thankful that no matter what the situation is, we can be certain they will always show up and place themselves in danger to help anyone, anytime, no matter the circumstances. While we do expect to learn more in this investigation, one thing is certain: we will never be able to make sense of such a senseless loss. As with all San Jose Police Department officer-involved shootings, a thorough investigation is being completed by the department's homicide unit and the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. The case will also be monitored administratively by the San Jose Police Department Internal Affairs Unit, the City Attorney's Office, and the Office of the Independent Police Auditor. Thank you, and with that, I will take questions.
Provide spelling for the name of the person shot.
Yes, it is first name Mateusz, last name Dzierbun.
ZZ.
There is a Z at the end of his first name, and the second letter of his last name is also a Z.
You had mentioned no mental history of documented mental health history or criminal history. Do you have any sense of whether this person was a subject of prior police calls, even if that didn't lead to arrest or anything along those lines?
Not for us, not that we can discover, but apparently he's moved around the country quite a bit, and so homicide detectives are trying to work to retrace his steps, but we were unable to find any documented mental health history or prior contacts. There were no prior contacts with us. Yes, sir.
KTVU, how long has this man resided in Fremont, and was there any contact with his family after the incident?
So I don't know how long he has resided in Fremont, and yes, we did have contact with his family.
Can you share anything about that, given the nature of the case? Anything of the contact with the family and what the result of that was?
No, not really. I mean, we contacted family members to inform them and find out if they had any information. One second, I will come back to you. Yes, sir.
Chief, any idea if he was the subject of a domestic violence restraining order or any civil issues, domestics, anything like that on the civil side?
So if he was the subject of a restraining order, that would be in a computer system, and we would have found that, and there was no such order. Whether he had any involvement in any civil litigation, that wouldn't necessarily be something we would know through our databases. But again, we're looking at everything about his history, but we're not aware of anything like that.
How about child welfare history, anything like that with those kinds of authorities?
Not in Santa Clara County and not in Alameda County that we could find. But as I said, he did move around the country some, and so we're not aware of anything anywhere else at this time. Yes, sir.
What was his connection to that specific neighborhood that he was in?
Again, I'm not really certain why he chose Cataldi Park. Perhaps he had some familiarity with it, but I don't really know.
Were there other officers who used less lethal simultaneously or prior to the officer and the sergeant?
There were other officers that were armed with less lethal, and unfortunately they weren't able to try those options before he forced the issue. Yes, sir.
Chief, would you just tell us about the timeline? How long after officers arrived and realized, or at least understood the situation as full as they could at that moment until the shot?
Sure. The arrival was at 15:31 hours or 3:31 p.m., and shots were fired at 15:34 hours. So it all unfolded pretty rapidly.
Do you care to comment if you've seen anything like this or compare it to anything that you've seen in your career, both in a leadership position and as an officer?
Well, I don't. I've been a police officer 33 years. I don't ever remember a parent murdering their child so brutally. I mean, I don't remember a lot of homicides, period, as violent and brutal as this one. So it's disturbing. I think this would be a disturbing call for the responding officers and our call taker and our dispatchers that had to handle this, even without the officer involved shooting. It's the death of a child, the murder of a child, the violent murder of a child is disturbing enough. And then for it to end the way it did with this man forcing the officer's hand is it's a very tough incident for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious about the 911 call. You say it came from the father, right?
Yes.
When the police arrived, were there any other bystanders, or was he in the secluded part of the park, or do you know that?
My understanding is, well, he was immediately over the victim, and I don't believe there was anybody else immediately in the area, but I can't say with 100% certainty. But he was obviously the person involved in the death of the child.
Yes. Chief, I was just going to ask, I don't know if this is too much detail. I see some objects on the ground here. Is there any other, contextual information you can give us about what was determined in the initial investigation about the setup here and what we're seeing?
It's hard for me. The picture's a little bit blurry. I'm not sure exactly what all those items are. I think I can't comment. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if anybody has any follow-up, feel free to send me. Go ahead, Robert.
Robert.
Finish up.
I can ask after.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's a peripheral question to protocol. It's weird to ask this question by proxy given the IPAs here, but there's a statement put on the IPA's website about internal affairs no longer being on scene for police shootings, and want to get any comment about that protocol change, rationale, and that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, the rationale is that they're not part of the criminal investigation and they don't need to be there, and it's probably a carryover from something that's just been done for many years, but something the IPA brought up in his recommendations, and frankly, he's right. So they don't need to respond at that point.
Was that the point of the IPA recommendation? I thought the IPA recommendation was about being on scene in the same fashion as IA, not for everyone to be not there anymore.
Well, there's a criminal investigation, which is then followed by an administrative investigation, and if someone's not part of the criminal investigation, then they really don't belong in the criminal portion of it.
Why now, though? Because that seems to have been practiced for decades.
Right, and as I say, it's probably a carryover from something that was just done for many years, and actually the IPA pointed out a contradiction for us, and so we made a correction. Yes, sir.
And just triple checking that yesterday's shooting as well as the one a week prior involved weapons, so confirming the DA's involved, not the AG in both of these cases.
Yes.
How did the suspect get to the scene? Was he in a truck, a van, a car?
I think we're still exploring that. I think we believe he drove there, but I'm not sure. I don't know if we know that 100% with certainty.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chief. There's some witnesses who indicated that the suspect had been there for quite a while. Do you have any estimate of time of actual death of the 9-year-old was stabbing? I mean, hours prior, just prior, before the officers arrived?
I don't have that estimate right now.
If you have any follow-up, please let me know. I did want to provide one clarification. I think this came up late after we had talked. There was to answer your question earlier, there was a simultaneous discharge of a taser when the shots went off with one of the other officers that were there. So it's the only thing for clarification. Feel free to send me an email. I'm more than happy to give you any other answers that we didn't get here. Thank you.